According to the Family Research Council, a nonprofit U.S. organization, in 2023, over 436 fires devastated or heavily damaged churches, most of which were caused through vandalism and arson, and almost all of them were Christian churches. A few months ago, the entire Christian community was insulted through the Olympics, with a blasphemous take on the Last Supper that was not only disgusting and vile, but even promoted satanic imagery and symbolism. We're also hearing about how clergy members within the church are being very contradictory to the church's core teaching and dogma, promoting things such as same-sex marriages, banning of Latin Mass churches, and so forth. Surely this would cause outrage from Christians, but the reality is they appear mostly silent while the opposition falsely cries about being oppressed, and while they lash out that the other side is actually privileged. This is a sign of what I like to call the soft-hearted epidemic, where people don't take a stand for themselves and their beliefs, and instead let evil permeate throughout the world. For us to begin tackling this issue, we need to discuss why people are acting in such a way. Why has it become a trend more so now than ever before?
Well, there are, of course, multiple factors. I think that by this time, definitely at least the Christian community, the Roman Catholic community, looking at the recent news about our pontiff and about the leadership in the church as general, they can see that the leadership not only gave up to be the opposing force against this trend, they pretty much joined that trend themselves. Right? There have been more than few actually news from the Vatican lately past week or two, which are not really, pleasing what is going on right now. It seems to me that definitely at least leadership in the church is completely on board with any of this crazy idea. So that is one thing, and of course, then you got, us as members, of the church, but also, as the Western society as the whole. Like, what do we are, where is our society? And I'm going to a little bit segue back about almost 3 decades ago when I came to the United States. I talked to a few people about their lives and so on, and tried to compare it with life behind the Iron Curtain on the other side. And most of the people, they told me straight away, something which I already saw myself right away too, is they said, well, we as Americans, we are weak, we are complacent, we are kind of lazy, we are spoiled, right? And,
right.
Well, needless to say, I already seen that myself, but at least they were honest about it. And I think that particular problem, that softness, didn't get any better. It actually got worse over those 3 decades. We got to the point right now that there is almost no opposing force against this particular woke culture. There is none, right? Now, I understand that the Newton, he I think it was the third law, or I don't know, second law of the Newton, that for every force in nature exists the equal opposing counterforce.
Right, yeah.
Well, that is in the nature, but that's not with the people themselves, because the people's mentality, it can be really pushed quite far, without any reaction against the opposing force. Unfortunately, that's what is the trend right now. And that's, and again, we might going to bring a bit conspiracy theory. Maybe it is true, maybe not, but it seems to me that it has been almost like pre-planned by the certain entities who are in the charge of our states, our government, and so on. So we are getting to the point right now that people are just became like a sheep. I've seen that back in communism, and it was very, very disheartening that people really knew what's going on and were unhappy with majority of the things, and especially, with their leadership, but also with their everyday lives, economy, living standards, and so on. But the answer was like, well, what can I really do? I cannot do really anything. So I'm just going to live my everyday life, I'm not going to try to make the waves. So
they were sheep.
They were the sheep, yeah. So that is the problem, yeah. That's what we kind of becoming nowadays. Nobody wants to do anything, and kind of believing like, well, as long as I'm going to stick my head in the sand and I'm not going to fight back, that somehow the opposing force, right? Well, they're just going to somehow ease up and give me a break, give all of us a break. It's going to be okay.
Right.
But it's not like that. Well, then, unlike the Newton said about, the law of the nature, law of the, force of the nature, in a human beings, it's just going to keep growing and growing. All right. And God knows where is the end. It's all unfortunately, it's right now all in devil's hands, and he's going to be pushing as far as he wants to. So it's up to the people, up to the people right now to actually, toughen up. That might going to be probably a different question, right? How to do that, right?
Right. Well, because it's kind of very, very similar to another, actually it was, I think, the last episode we talked about, which was going against the flow. And sometimes you get the question of how do you really start this attack, or this, not attack, but being on the offensive when it comes to these different counterculture ideologies that are contradictory to what we believe in. It's some people, they don't want to make that first move. They're waiting for somebody else to make that first move, but they themselves don't want to be that person. And I think it's a good question to ask. How do we change our mindset from, I'm going to wait for somebody else to be the initiator, and we instead become that person? So I'm going to be, if nobody else, then I'm going to be the person that's going to take the stand.
I was listening, again, I'm going to segue a little bit. I did listen about the American Revolutionary War, especially one of the very interesting bit was actually what happened before because the general kind of knowledge is like, well, we had a certain leaders, and George Washington, James Madison, John Adams, and so on, right? And they kind of let the whole thing. Well, that is true, right? There was, the people who were kind of the thinkers, right? But there were also the people who were the doers. And those doers were exponentially more than those thinkers. So what these doers were, what they were actually even doing before the whole war started. So the interesting bit was that, months, maybe even it was a year or more before the whole war started, they were actually preparing themselves. There was training already initiated.
Right, in the private militias.
Yes, and the people who, which is also, I was pretty surprised. Majority of the people, they never actually even shot the musket in their entire lives or rifle. They were completely clueless because a lot of people, they are living in big cities that time already, big towns.
Right.
So they didn't do much hunting or especially much, fighting at the frontier as the, few people who are actually living outside in outdoors. So there was training initiated. So they put people in charge, people who had experience, and they started to train. I don't think so they called them necessarily militia at that point yet. It was not very that organized yet. But
I'm not sure if I'm conflating two different things, but there were also a group of people called the Minutemen.
Yep, that was the people actually who kind of were already, a little bit, ahead of the curve, right? But I talk about now the people who just were the majority, who was completely were like regular, baker, right? Butcher on the street, tailor, people who are walking in the docks, and so on. Like they were way beyond the militia, right? I mean, like they even didn't know how to load proper rifle, right? The militiamen were usually the guys, who actually were part of the French, and so they knew something. The people who actually were doing hunting, who were actually going to the frontier and pushing, that was the kind of the guys who actually knew what to do a little bit, right? You can say like a present, like your retired soldiers or something like that. But that was not the main piece, right? The main piece was actually the regular folks. So they were definitely preparing themselves. And I don't know, again, how much in depth they went. I know definitely that they were, learning to shoot, the military drills and so on. But I'm sure there were some other things involved as well. And one of them things is the mental toughness, right? Physical toughness. That's very important. I mean, if a person can know how to shoot the firearm, let's say, at that time, well, okay, but am I ready actually mentally to take the fight against the English, against the enemy? Or am I going to run away from the battlefield, right? So I'm pretty sure that was involved as well. I don't know, again, they didn't mention that, how much in depth they went on that particular subject, but I'm sure they also prepared, the guys, because a lot of guys, again, living in towns, cities, they were, living, nice, comfortable homes for that particular time. And they were not able to live, outside in nature, living, just sleeping under the sky and just living on the food which they hunted for or which somehow was, provided to them. That's different lifestyle, right? So that had to change too as well. So it was definitely interesting, that how, people prepare themselves. They didn't rely only on some, leadership, right? But they rely, of course, on themselves as well. They kind of prepare themselves. Because at the end, the battles are not won by the generals, even though many movies, in Hollywood.
Right, yeah. It's won by soldiers, of course.
By the soldiers, yeah. The generals, they lead, but the soldiers, they fight. And there is only few generals, but there's tens of thousands of soldiers, right?
Right.
So that is the most important thing. I always thought, the soldiers, you can have, best general, but with the crappy soldiers, the battle's going to be lost. And that's actually what happened, for first, few years in American Revolutionary War, because again, the soldiers were not prepared to fight yet. It took them, few years to actually get to the fighting shape, to actually be able, to be effective against the redcoats.
Right.
So that's kind of something, we can bring, to our society right now. I mean, I'm trying to say necessarily that we got to fight or anything like that, but I mean that particular mental toughness. We have people, right? A lot of people right now who are, supporting Donald Trump, right? Who are supporting J.D. Vance, who actually wanted change in our country because they believe that the other side it just doesn't go right away, doesn't bring the country, to the place they believe to. Mm-hmm. But except that support, for the leaders, are they doing anything else with their lives?
No, they're pretty complacent with the status quo.
Yeah, and because of that, as I said before, general with ineffective army, ineffective soldiers, is going to lose the battle. Doesn't matter how smart a general is. That might still going to happen today too. Yeah, we got, good leaders right now who are trying to, lead, our country in the right direction. But if, their followers, the supporters, right, if they're going to actually fail to actually prepare themselves, right, mentally and physically too, of course, then, the whole movement's going to fail. And that is, I don't see very much talking about, I mean, it's always when I listen to some of these speeches at the rallies and so on, right? There's always, we got to bring the country here. We're going to fix this, and our present government is doing this and that. Well, I got it. That's very,
offloading a lot of the problems onto the government.
Yeah. Yes. But what about us? What about as a citizens, what about, look at our own lives, how we live our own lives? What are we actually doing, every day? Are we just going, and we just go to the work, come back from the work, few words, with the kids, and then we sit in front of a computer, play video games, drink beer, or do something
Watch
stupid,
sports. Yeah.
Useless like that, right? Are we actually, toughen up ourselves? Are we actually improving our lives, making actually our very own lives, a little bit different? Or are we still the complacent, lazy, the typical, what most of the Europeans think about, just fat, lazy Americans, right? Are we that? Right. Or are we actually trying to be something a little bit better? And I think that's for each of us to think about, and that's look at our very own lives and be like, you know what, I spend, most of my life, in this comfortable lifestyle, driving the car everywhere, even if I'm never going to go to the gas station, 2 minutes away where I could easily walk. I drive the car over there because I'm just that lazy. Am I trying to do something with my life first? How am I going to contribute, right, to my country? Because that vote, right, in November, is that actually the everything what I can do for my country to make it better? No, or can I improve my life as well? Maybe start with the family. How can I actually do better as a father or as a mother raising my kids? Do I just blindly leave my kids in the school, let them to soak all the propaganda or the wokeness? Or am I trying to actually spend my time with the kids when they come from the school, talk to them, explain them the things, and try to actually lead them in proper direction? Am I going to the church and take my time off for God to spend with God? And also show it to my kids that, the faith in God, in Jesus Christ, is so important for our lives. Am I doing that, or am I just go through the motion? Either they just go to the church, just sit it through, and they just, okay, done, I'm done, for the rest of the week. Or even worse, I just don't go to church at all with some silly excuse that, well, I'm so busy, or I'm so tired, or so on.
Right, yeah.
Right? So you can go through all these, different, improvements in your life, and you kind of... person can figure out like, well, hey, there is a lot of things on a plate I can change right now in my very own life, in my very own family. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is going to make us, the better citizens, or kind of better soldiers, just better people, because that's what this country needs. Not just the new and better leadership, but also needs better people, better citizens, which are actually going to contribute to our society.
It's a little bit kind of similar when you were kind of talking about this country. I was immediately thinking about the JFK, ask not what the country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And if the leadership, you can have the best leadership, but if the people are complacent, if the people are being sheepish, the whole country will go with it. The whole country will collapse. You could have the most corrupt government, but as long as the people are willing to take a stand for their beliefs, their ideas, they're able to, challenge the status quo, they can set the wrongs of any corrupt government. And so it is important that, we can do things just in our daily lives, as you mentioned, right? With our family, raising the future generations to be even more tough, even more steadfast in their beliefs than even maybe we are, to have those good principles, those good responsibilities and behaviors, and then also to spread the word. When you're in a discussion, you don't have to overpower the other person, but don't be afraid to say your mind, speak your mind, and get into a debate with these other people. Because a lot of people, they just when they see somebody with other differing ideologies or opinions, they just kind of silent, and they don't challenge it. They don't even state their opinion. They just kind of go with the flow, as we kind of already talked about in the past. They go with the flow, and they're complacent.
Well, we could see it, on the latest debate between J.D. Vance and Walz, right? You can see one guy who had a mental toughness just because the way he lived his childhood and most of his life, really fighting with all the difficulties which life brought in. And then you got on the other side, the opponent, right, who was completely weak.
Who was living a posh life. Yeah.
Very posh, very comfortable life. Yes, he pretended that he's a tough guy, he's, National Guard and so on, I'm tough, I'm hard, and so on. But, when actually all came out, he was all fake. It was all fake. And it's easy to pretend, right? You're like an actor, right? You can pretend for a while, but you cannot pretend forever. Eventually truth will come out. Sooner or later it will come out. So we can act, I can act, and so on, pretend that I'm something. But sooner or later there is going to come some challenge, some situation when the truth will come out. And just like in that story, people will realize, well, the king is naked. Mm-hmm. There is nothing. That was just all fake. So now the mental toughness, right? Mental toughness, it's not something like you just turn the switch, right? And it's there.
Of course.
It has to be developed, right? It has to be developed.
Right.
And it includes a lot of different things, Mental toughness is not just like, oh, this is mental toughness. Well, it's kind of the name overcharging, kind of like an umbrella of multiple different, actually, personal traits, the self-confidence. That's part of the mental toughness, right? Being confident in yourself, what you do, determination. I want to do this, and I'm going to go for it, no matter what. You have to be also, flexible, adaptable, because the things are changing in life, right? Self-aware around your surroundings and of yourself, so you don't talk stupid things, like a Tim Walz. You got to be self-aware all the time, right? So the mental toughness includes so many different traits. And that's why it's so difficult to develop it. And it takes us some time. It's not like, I'm going to be mental tough. From now on, I'm going to be tough. It ain't going to work. Not going to work. Just like, the militia and so on, they were preparing and took them months and months and months to prepare themselves. And then even
even years.
Yeah, and then when war started, it still took them a few years before actually they were, strong enough, able enough to actually fight the redcoats. It's kind of like with the people and that mental toughness. It's going to take time, but they better start, sooner than later,
right.
Because time is ticking, right? Time is ticking, and the opposing force, as we talked about, it's just keep growing and growing and growing, because
when good people don't do anything, then evil persists.
Yeah. Exactly, because when there's no counterforce, well, then the opposing force will keep growing.
Is there a way because we kind of talked about how we can change ourselves, is there much we can do to shape others to also be less soft-hearted?
Well, I would not really focus that much, especially at this point, on the others. You gotta really start with yourself. That is probably the hardest, but also the most important part. It's always easy to pick up, that person, he does this, that, and that. Well, okay, that's great. It's easy to point out. Well, what about look at yourself? What about your own problems, right? What about if somebody tells you, well, hey, buddy, but what about you have these problems, this, that? this, that, and that, right? Oh, no, don't say that. So no, we got to start from ourselves first.
Well, I understand
Jesus
that.
Christ, there is a part of the reading in the New Testament when Jesus Christ said, don't try to pick up the splinter in your neighbor's eye. First remove the beam which you have in your own eye, and then try to help your neighbor remove a little splinter from his eye.
Right.
And that's what it meant, Just focus first on your own problem, because each of us get a lot of, issues. And then, if everybody's going to do that, trust me, the issues which we are going to have, with the other person is going to be much, much, much smaller, if any.
Right.
So
I agree, but I would say that it's important to lead by example. That by because you can find other people that are like-minded, have this exact same views and beliefs as yourself. But again, even still, it can be hard to kind of make that first move. So when you take this stand for yourself, you're not soft-hearted. You're actually willing to put yourself out there. I feel like it's really important to try to set yourself as an example while improving your own self. And again, as you mentioned, focus on your own problems. Take the beam out of your own eye before you try to help others, right? That can also hopefully lead others to see, oh, this person is doing that. He's getting out of his comfort zone. Maybe I should do the same.
Yeah.
Because we already talked about how it's very, very difficult to be the initiator of change, but it's not as difficult to be a follower.
That is very, very correct. I would, if somebody would ask me, so we have a person like, okay, you are right. Some of the listeners, you are right. So where I got to start? I would say the always best place, to start with a good prayer. After all, majority of us are the Christians, but it doesn't really matter. Just make your prayer. And then after that, start making the thoughtful decisions and stay with those decisions. Don't deviate, don't bend, don't try, cover down when somebody doesn't like certain things. If you make thoughtful decision, right decision, not decision on a whim, really deep, thoughtful decision, just go with that and live your life according to that. And just keep doing that in different sectors of your life, being your personal behavior, dealing with the family, spouses, raising the kids. Then you can bring, further your surrounding friends, friends you trust, and so on and so on, right? Because it's almost impossible to tell the people, like, hey, you got to do exactly this and exactly that, because whatever works for me, not going to work for you. And that's why, that thoughtful decision is very, very important. Each of us should take a deep thought, think about what I got to fix, what I can contribute, what I can be better at, and just go with that.
Well, we'll have to wrap it there. That is it for this week. If you have any questions, feel free to send them to us as we may answer them in a future episode. We'd appreciate it if you could follow us on all social media. And until next time, thanks for listening. Take care. And God bless.
God bless and Godspeed.